Kathy, I have been in this space of thinking about connectivity. I call it human connectivity, which is another way to look at digital infrastructure. And I'm interested, as a storyteller, and oftentimes in stories, and maybe this is too binary, there are white hats and black hats. There are heroes and there are villains. And I'm interested in, when it comes to achieving the kind of connectivity that I know you believe in and want to do, what's in the way? Who are the agents, or what are the impulses, or what's the inertia that's keeping you from connecting and reaching that higher level of connection that we all deserve and want?
Yes, thank you for asking that. So it's great to see everyone today. Just for context, so I lead the public policy organization at Verizon, and like Steve said, we're really focused on policies that encourage investment and encourage innovation, particularly in the mobile and wireline space. So for me now, top of mind, what I think is the most important issue for Verizon, but also for all of us, anyone who cares about connectivity and universal connectivity, is spectrum policy.
Right.
So spectrum, the airwaves that wireless networks run on, and we're at a really interesting point.
But a lot of people might not know what spectrum is, so tell them that.
Yeah. So the electromagnetic frequency spectrum is really big. It's where you get satellites, where you get microwaves, where you get gamma rays, if you watch comic books. The radio frequency spectrum is in the middle, and that's what wireless networks run on. So the government controls access to that spectrum by auction usually. They'll have pieces of it, and they're used for different things. They have different characteristics based on where in the band they are. So if it's really high up, it's really good for very, very high capacity, very kind of beam-forming type of communications, and then low capacity spectrum is for travels long distances.
Right.
Okay. So the government allocates this spectrum, auctions it off. But we're at a point right now in spectrum policy where we have a lot of challenges. Most importantly, right now the FCC doesn't have authority to auction spectrum right now. So that's unprecedented.
Because Congress has not given them the authority.
Congress did not renew that authority.
Congress are the villains in this story.
Well, okay, I'm going to resist the villains, heroes.
Okay.
Because no one wants to tell.
Well, they have not done their job yet.
It's left unfinished, yes, and there's a lot of different competing forces there. One of them is we need to figure out which spectrum is going to be used next for wireless communication, right? Which bands are going to be used? How are we going to do it? How long is it going to take? How is it going to get cleared and auctioned? And not to interrupt, but I used to work on spectrum and economic policy in the 1990s. Most of you were not alive then, but there were some of us working back then. And in the 1990s, at that time, when auctions were beginning, the Pentagon and really, all around the world, the military bureaucracies tended to squat on a lot of spectrum that they didn't use. It was there for national security reasons. But I'm just interested, is the Pentagon still part of the story? They're definitely part of the story. And we're at a point right now where the bands that have been easy to clear and auction have already been cleared and auctioned.
Right.
So the bands that are left that are going to be most useful for the kind of connectivity and capacity that you all need, that you all rely on, that the government relies on, that networks rely on, that's where that spectrum lies. So it's kind of a very limited 3 gigahertz to 10 gigahertz is the bands. And DoD, the Department of Defense, is actually operating in that spectrum now. And to be fair, there are a lot of very complex interests at stake. There's a lot of systems in those bands that you need very careful attention to and study to figure out how to clear and auction some of that spectrum, not all of it, but just a portion of it. But we're at a point right now where, here's kind of the real bottom line for all of you. Right now, most of the wireless carriers have a good, robust pipeline of spectrum they can use right now. But it takes 10 years sometimes to clear spectrum from the time you identify this is a band that's necessary strategically for the United States to when it actually becomes in use and your phone is operating on it, 10 years. So if you're not doing the work now to make sure that spectrum is going to come online in 5 to 10 years, what are you going to do? If you're a company like Verizon.
So who has to be the first mover? Is it Congress authorizing the FCC to broker that? Is that the missing
I think that would be the most
equation?
Effective way to get it done, because if you have a spectrum bill that reauthorizes the FCC's authority to auction, and you include either certain bands that should be auctioned, and I'm not talking about immediately, like in 5 to 10 years, or if you say you have to study and complete a study by a particular day, right, or a particular year, Just certainty and timelines, I think, are what we need right now. Because, you said you interviewed Hans Vestberg, our CEO, last year. He's very focused on this. So Verizon has spent $160 billion since Hans has been the CEO on investment, on our network and on spectrum. We just spent $53 billion on spectrum a few years ago. For us to be able to put that kind of money into the network and invest it, we need to have certainty. You need to be able to know what kind of spectrum you're going to have, how you can use it, what the rules around it are. And that's, I think, a big missing piece when we talk about connectivity and we talk about infrastructure that maybe most people in this room aren't really focused on.
Let me ask you another dimension of this. I happen to know your folks really well for a long time. And I know that both globally and domestically, digital divide issues really matter to the company. And when this administration came in, they put a lot of money into infrastructure, a lot of it digital infrastructure. This morning we were with Alan Davidson, who is the Assistant Secretary of Commerce, who's responsible for taking this $50 billion and connecting communities and working out there. But I remember in 1999, there was a 3-page spread. I was responsible for it. I was the communications person, sort of at the New America Foundation. And we got in 1999 a major story telling what was going to unfold in the digital divide and how inequality was going to be exacerbated in this area. And I'm interested in what will put that topic to rest. What do you need to end the digital divide debate in a compelling way? What is Verizon doing on that? And what does the government need to do that it hasn't yet done?
Yeah. Well, I'll start with the easy answer. There's always 2 issues you talk about when you're talking about broadband: access and affordability, right? Can you get it?
And literacy.
And what do you pay for it? And then adoption too, right? Literacy. The government right now, your point on access, is really focused on deploying broadband to areas that don't have it today, subsidizing investment in those areas, subsidizing private providers. There's a lot of details and complexities around that, but they're moving forward. I think that's in a good place. On the affordability side, the government a few years ago put in place a subsidy program for consumers. If you're a low-income consumer, you get a $30 subsidy today that pays for your broadband. And because companies like Verizon are charging a certain amount, it's essentially free to people who are eligible for it. That's about to disappear. So that program is going to run out of money in about 3 weeks.
3 weeks?
3 weeks.
And this is 22, in my notes, 22 million customers.
Yeah, 22.
So what happens to that customer?
So for companies like Verizon, and most of the big companies, to be fair, are going to have low-income plans already. So right now at Verizon, if you were on ACP, you were getting broadband for free. You can still get it for $20 if you're eligible.
Right.
Most companies are also basically going to continue something like that. And then for us, if you're a new customer coming to us, you're eligible. You get it for free for 6 months. So we're going to kind of continue that plan for 6 months. But the important part is there are going to be millions of customers who have that subsidy today that are going to lose it. So we can do our part, but the government really needs to figure out a way, long-term, what do we do about these customers?
Are there people screaming out there about this?
There are many.
Is there a lot of awareness?
I can't actually see anyone in the room. But
there's Alan Bahar over here. Go to Bahar.
Yes, there are a lot
I'll tell you, Alan Bahar. Just I love Alan. He's got a clothing store. I'll advertise for anybody on K Street. But he outfitted John Wick in John Wick 3. I mean, it's the fact that I know that and I'm ready for Jeopardy. It's interesting.
Okay.
But
that's not an easy segue for me. Yes. But so there are a lot of people that care a lot about it, including Senator Welch, who we were speaking to this morning, who has sponsored a bill that would refund it, at least temporarily, just for like a year or two. I mean, there are a lot of questions some people have about the program, how it operates. That's all fine and good. We can change those things. But the money is literally just going to run out unless Congress acts pretty quickly. And then we'll have to figure out long-term, what do we do? But affordability is a big part of the equation. I think the government has a good handle on the access piece. But it's always, on access, it's always back to those most expensive areas, right? It's always the places where it just costs so much to go. There's a reason why private industry isn't there anymore with like a fiber network or a high-speed wireless network.
Do you think the government's deployment of resources in this area is solving it or not?
I think the program is very well thought out, and the rules are getting worked through right now. Right now, each individual state is going to determine how the money is spent and what the rules are around that. So we're working through that. But yes, I think we're optimistic about it. But then you just have to kind of wait and see, are we really going to cover every single person in the country with a high-speed, reliable broadband network?
I'm going to tell our team I don't see a shot clock, so I'm having really fun up here. I'm going to go a couple more minutes because I don't know when this ends. I do want to say the other thing that I think in the telecom area that was so interesting was the sort of, concern, excitement, 5G. Are we in a 5G world and I don't know it? Is it 5G everywhere? Or are there barriers to 5G? I mean, where are we in the 5G story?
Well, we are. I mean, 5G now, the FCC just put out a report on broadband deployment. They have these maps now, and they're keeping track in a very granular way. So a large percentage of the country right now, 91%, can actually get a 35 megabit service using 5G. That is tremendous.
So I may be getting it and not knowing
You are getting it. I'm sure you are getting it.
I'm a Verizon client, so is Verizon a 5G pal? Are you in the...
But that's only part of it. So having a faster speed on your smartphone is one part of 5G.
Right.
But we really just launched a couple years ago for Verizon. And we really have a huge runway in terms of the kind of innovation that we're going to see. I get a little frustrated sometimes when I hear some of the impatience around that. Like 4G was a whole decade, right? Where we saw tremendous growth. We saw the app economy develop over 4G. We're going to see a similar economy develop over 5G, but we're really just at the beginning. We're going to see huge changes in manufacturing, right? Because the latency is so small on 5G. It's how fast data travels between one point and another. You can do tremendous things in healthcare, right? If you have that kind of low latency, high speed, high capacity service. You'll see private networks. It's 5G used in a very secure way in private networks that really will revolutionize a lot of the things we were talking about this morning. So we are really at the beginning, but it's tremendous how fast these networks have been deployed. I know we are really, really proud of what
And let me just ask you finally, and thank you for this. We didn't rehearse this, and it's just interested in how you're looking at the future. And I remember talking to people in the digital space, big platforms like Google. Eric Schmidt was Google, and how frustrated the digital telecom infrastructure folks were because the data explosion, video, gaming, all of the stuff that was going to travel over your networks, that they were gravity worked differently in two. In many ways, your networks were in a way being exploited by the digital platforms in this. As you look forward and look at what the big stress points are going to be in the telecom world 10 years from now, what do we need to prepare for?
Well, again, I think the spectrum policy is a big issue. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years, and this is probably the most challenging issue that I've worked on the whole time I've been doing it. Because we do have to be prepared for, I mean, we put out a report last year about capacity on our network, and mobile traffic doubled, more than doubled over 5 years. Ericsson estimates that there's a 40% increase in data usage in 2023 from 2022. So to get the kind of innovation that you're talking about, you're going to talk about today, like you have to have that engine going. You need the spectrum, you need the policies in place that make it easy to deploy, easy to invest, easy to build.
Well, thank you for supporting today's conversation.
Thank you.
It's
great to see you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Kathy Grillo, Senior Vice President,
everyone.
Public Policy and
Enjoy.
Government Affairs for Verizon.
Thanks.
Thank you
Great
so much.
seeing you.